late 90s were a time of great change, innovation, and competition.
Just what I need, another little bald guy.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're seeing how Sony's debut console, the PlayStation, stacks up against the Nintendo 64.
Looking for love here.
Round 1. Technical capabilities.
According to my research, you're in the market for a new game system.
When it comes to hardware, both Sony and Nintendo came prepared. In terms of raw graphical output, the PS1 sported a 32-bit CPU, capable of handling 3D graphics and full motion video. Though some games had an issue of jaggies, or sharp-edged models in place of smooth ones. Nintendo's console contained a 64-bit processor, or reality coprocessor, which, combined with better polygon count, was capable of producing smoother 3D environments than its competitor. The N64 could also output in both composite and S-video, had a color palette of over 16 million, and included 4 megabytes of RAM, double the amount the PlayStation had, and that is before the expansion pack came along to add another 4 megabytes for greater experiences in select games. The added power and faster read speed gave the N64 a waiting time reduction as well, as a vast amount of PS1 titles suffered from really long load times, while the load times under Nintendo's hood were almost non-existent. There was a downside to all this, but we're going to come back to that in a second.
Cute. Very cute.
In terms of sheer power and range, Nintendo earns this point. Round 2. Innovative features.
Quiet, bit boy. We'll ask the questions around here.
Getting a foothold in the market is tough for any console, so innovation is key. As it happens, both the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 toyed with new and interesting ideas.
I guess someone up there pressed all the right buttons.
The Nintendo 64's implementation of a control stick cannot be understated, providing a greater degree of control never before experienced. The console itself also reinforced the idea of 4 simultaneous controller ports, while introducing concepts such as the Rumble Pack and memory expansion.
You didn't tell them about the Rumble Pack, did you?
However, the PlayStation offered something Nintendo would not: compact discs as a viable format. The amount of storage space available on CDs made Sony's system dwarf Nintendo's reliance on cartridges.
The actual CD starts here as a handful of plastic pellets.
To put it in perspective, the biggest game on the N64 was a port of Resident Evil 2 at 64 megabytes, while the PlayStation's CDs had 600 megabytes of storage and could be interchangeable for even longer, larger games. Games the N64 just couldn't handle.
You guys, you don't know the half of it.
So, for its embrace of a bold new feature, the PlayStation wins this round.
Hey! Why's everyone being so quiet?
Round 3. Controller.
Which is the first time that we saw the familiar triangle, circle, X, and square buttons.
As mentioned before, Nintendo brought a control stick into the mix, placing it in the center of an M-shaped controller. Though the overall shape was found to work well, the placement of the yellow C buttons and the awkwardness of plugging Rumble or memory packs into the back highlighted the controller's bizarre design.
More when you try to squeeze one hand in here and then use another one there, and then it's really difficult to get these buttons on top.
However, the stick itself also had a massive flaw. They loosen up very easily, especially after playing games like Mario Party, which require intense stick rotation. The PlayStation's controller, meanwhile, went with a central shape akin to the Super Nintendo's controller, but with handlebar-esque grips at the bottom.
And a completely unique design. If you think about when this came out, there was nothing else like this.
This design element, coupled with the manageable layout of its direction pad, 4 shoulder buttons, and action buttons, made for a controller that was distinct yet comfortable. Though with only digital input, it wasn't ideal for the 3D gaming the industry was moving towards. That all changed with the arrival of the DualShock controller, Sony's answer to the N64's analog stick, which featured not 1, but 2 sticks, thus setting a new standard for 3D control.
Take a look at the size of these things. They are identical.
In fact, the DualShock controller was so well put together that its design is still being used by Sony today. Granted, there have been minor additions over the years, but the overall shape and input placement has remained essentially the same.
These things practically shake the house.
In comparison, the N64 was Nintendo's only controller to use the M shape, with their follow-up, the GameCube, going for a completely different design.
They've essentially removed this middle piece and then shifted all the buttons and sticks around.
For a smart design that's still being used today, Sony wins this round.
How does that make you feel, buddy? Feel a little like your days are numbered?
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
Round 4. Exclusive titles.
Okay, let me handle this.
Games are the lifeblood of a console, and console-exclusive games can highlight the unique and enduring qualities of a system in question. Nintendo came right out of the gate with the launch of Super Mario 64. In the coming years, they emphasized quality over quantity, with games like Banjo-Kazooie, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and GoldenEye 007, the latter being considered the best multiplayer game of that console generation. Sony matched the N64's effort with a healthy mix of exclusives, including the likes of Resident Evil and Crash Bandicoot. But perhaps the biggest shock was when Squaresoft broke away from Nintendo to develop Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation.
If he succeeds, you survive.
This round is very, very close. While the PlayStation clearly has a bigger number of games, the aforementioned stronger hardware of the N64 allowed for their games to have a higher quality and greater lasting appeal.
Here we go!
That's not to say that the PS1 games are bad. Far from it, a lot of them are awesome. But the question of storage versus performance power meant that whichever system you preferred was usually dictated by whichever genre you preferred. Again, more on that in a second.
What did I say? No WWF! What's this?
Now Mom wants it.
However, as far as how well the games have held up by today's standards, Nintendo has the upper hand over Sony, which is a big deal considering that most early 3D games aged really, really badly.
Stay alert!
So, the N64, in a photo finish, just barely nabs this round.
Yeehaw!
Round 5. Appeal.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
The PlayStation and Nintendo 64 were equally intent on drawing a crowd, being specifically designed to appeal to particular markets.
Oh yes, indeed.
Sony's console aimed for a more mature crowd, promoting a game library based on adult-oriented titles, complex narratives, and an aim for realism. To that end, games like Metal Gear Solid and Gran Turismo took precedence in Sony's marketing. Contrarily, the Nintendo 64 was known for its appeal to young kids and teens, especially those looking for innovative multiplayer games like Super Smash Bros. Or Mario Party. Storage formats are another factor here as well. For younger gamers, cartridges are the way to go. Sure, adults have no problem keeping PlayStation CDs from getting scratched, but that sort of thing is a bit more challenging for the younger demographic that Nintendo was chasing.
Whatever, can I play?
Cartridges, however, could be stacked on top of each other willy-nilly with no worry about damage. Most of them still work today, despite the fact that they spent most of their lives in an awkward pile next to your VCR.
This time, it's not just my life on the line.
But those formats also dictated the games that were available. And when we look at the game genre variety on the two consoles, the comparison is almost night and day. Are you a fan of RPGs? The PS1 is unopposed. Fan of first-person shooters? GoldenEye and Perfect Dark alone make the N64 the ideal choice. How about fighting games? Tekken and Street Fighter made the PlayStation a better option. Action-adventure? Well, the power of the N64 made worlds feel much more vivid and, well, you get the idea. Given the difference in demographic focus and the two companies' equal levels of success in this field, we're calling this round a tie.
Can I play now?
Get your own game!
Overall, with a score of 3 apiece, this showdown is a draw. I know the result may seem like a bit of a cop-out, but here's the thing, guys. Each system has strong points and weaknesses, which means the result merely comes down to personal preference. While Nintendo's console had the better technical performance and multiplayer games, Sony's shined in terms of providing strong, narrative-driven games with plentiful content.
Looks like we both have a lot to learn about each other.
The PS1 versus N64 debate isn't like any other console war. Both companies went in radically different directions, and trying to compare the two is apples to oranges or cats versus dogs. Dogs are better.
I thought I was man's best friend.
Anyway, let us know which is your favorite, or rather, which one your parents bought you. And for more top 10s and versus battles published every day, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.